Stand over behind the court reporter. Come on in, please. Right in through the door.
Raise your right hand to the swear. You solemnly swear that the testimony you may give in the case now pending before this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Please. Could you tell us your full name and spell your last name?
Diane Marie Vander Molen, V as in Victor, ANDER MOLEN.
Ms. Vander Molen, are you a little nervous here today?
Very.
I'm relaxed. We have a family tree over here, and I was wondering if you could tell me where you fit on this. Okay, can you see the chart?
Yes.
And you see your name?
Mm-hmm.
And where are you?
I'm the fourth child of Joan and Arnold.
Down here, where I'm
Yes.
pointing?
Uh-huh.
Is Kathy the witness who just testified, your sister?
Yes.
And is Alan Anderson your cousin?
Yes.
And how old are you?
I am 34 years old.
So does that make you 9 years older than Lyle and 12 years older than Eric?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Is that yes?
Yes.
Did you spend various periods of time with Kitty and Jose Menendez?
Yes, I did.
And were they your aunt and uncle?
Yes.
When was the first time that you stayed with them?
1976 for the
Eh.
summer.
For the summer? And when was the second time?
1978.
And that
also,
was,
also for the summer for a little bit longer that time.
okay. And the next time?
1979 briefly.
Briefly is,
My friend Karen and I came up for a visit.
briefly is how long?
Oh, about 2 weeks.
And did you spend time with them again?
Yes.
And when was that?
I lived with them from the beginning of June 1982 until July 1983.
When you were first invited to stay with them in 1976, how old were you then?
I was 16 when I arrived, and I turned 17 while I was with them.
We're going to have further hearings.
Could we?
I was 16 when I arrived.
Why don't you just move a little closer to the microphone? Just move yourself in a little closer if you can. I know, knowing your physical. We
Are
can
you
move the
pregnant?
microphone as
Miss
well.
Vander Molen,
Yes.
are you pregnant? Okay.
Very,
move the
very. Thank you.
When you were first invited to stay with them, were you sent there, or is this something you wanted to do?
It was something that I wanted to do.
And why did you want to go there for a whole summer?
I had looked forward to it for a few years, and it
Why?
was. I had been told a lot about Kitty and Jose and Lyle and Eric and their family being very special to our family, and had met them a few years prior, and had been told that Jose had said that it would be okay for us to come out and visit, and looked very much forward to doing so.
And was that exciting for you?
Oh, very, yes.
Now, when you say that they were special to your family, how do you mean?
Sustain.
When you first went to stay with them, were you treated well?
In 1976, yes,
And did that change over the period of time that you went to visit them?
very much so.
And did Jose change during that period of time? Or did he stay the same?
Pretty much the same, only more so.
More
More
what?
intense, driven, arrogant.
And what about Kitty? Did she stay the same or did she change?
She changed very much.
And how did she change?
In 1976, I, she became like a mentor to me during that time period. I felt special with her during that time. By 1982-83 visit, I got to the point where I was afraid to come upstairs from my bedroom because I wasn't sure what was going to happen, because it seemed like I could do nothing right.
And if you did something wrong, what would Kitty do?
She would she would fly into rages, immense rages.
How would she look when she flew into these rages?
Her arms would
Would
be
you
out.
stand up if you can?
Yeah, of course she was not pregnant. Her arms would be out to here. Of course,
Fists upraised, Your Honor, for the record.
and her teeth would be like this, and she would be coming at you like that.
She would be coming at you. How close would she get?
She would approach me at times. Okay. I'm sorry.
Don't apologize.
Is
Is it frightening to you today to think about that?
It was, yeah, it was, and I recall that when I talk about it.
Okay. How close would she come to you when she did this?
She could get into my face, and sometimes it would start from a brief distance away, but she would move towards me as her anger was flying towards me also.
Is this something that happened once or twice, or is this something that happened more often?
Oh, it happened more than once or twice.
3 times?
It was quite regular.
And what's quite regular to you? Is that once a month? Once a week?
Maybe a couple times a week.
And what types of things would trigger these rages?
Gosh, if I hadn't performed up to her expectations, or if I'd come home late.
And when you say performed up to her expectations, what do you mean?
Sustained.
When she would get angry at you, would she just talk about what it is that you did wrong, or would she talk about you as a person?
Objection irrelevant.
Sustained.
What kinds of, would these fits or rages be in front of the boys?
Sometimes
And what types of things would she say to you?
she would attack me as a person, and let me know in no uncertain terms that she was very capable of marching me downstairs and tossing my belongings out on the street, and not caring that I was related to her.
And would she make you feel anything about yourself in terms of your own personal characteristics?
Oh yeah, myself.
Objection irrelevant.
Sustained.
Would she say anything about your personal characteristics?
Same objection irrelevant.
You have to lay a better foundation.
Would she, in these rages, which took place in front of the boys, would she say anything about you personally?
She attacked my character as a human being. I mean,
Okay. During your first visit in 1976, you took a trip to New York and a trip to Washington, D.C. Is that correct?
yes.
With the family. Was that enjoyable?
Mm-hmm.
Is that yes?
Yes. I'm sorry.
Over the period of time that you were there, you've said Jose became more intense and Kitty changed dramatically. Can you tell me what kinds of changes you saw in Kitty?
Both, when I was there in 76, it seemed that there was still, Kitty was able to still enjoy herself and be herself, both inside the home and outside the home. I also saw similar characteristics with Jose. By 1982 and 83 visit, there was a complete change in who they were inside the home when no one was around and who they would be to others outside the home.
Who would they be inside the home?
Objection irrelevant.
Sustain.
Can you describe their personality? Can you describe Kitty's personality characteristics inside the home? On the last visit, things you observed.
Same objection.
All right, you're asking her to describe the demeanor of Mrs. Menendez in the presence of the defendants.
Yes, Your Honor, I am.
All right. Do you understand the question?
Yes.
Could you describe it?
Kitty was quite frustrated and seemed to be immensely trying to keep up with what she considered to be her job, which was organizing the boys' schedules and keeping up with what was given to her from Jose to do each day. And there wasn't, in 76, there were moments when we could talk and relax, and there wasn't any of that by 82, 83. Just always frustrated and unhappy.
Were the rages more frequently in 82 and 83 than they were in 76?
Oh, immensely, yeah.
Was Kitty affectionate with the boys?
More so with Eric than with Lyle.
Okay, and what would you see her do with Eric? Let me start.
Okay, I think
Was there
I'm-
a change in how she reacted toward Eric between 76 and 82? Or was it the same? Was there a change?
She became more of his tutor.
Was she affectionate with him to the same degree?
No.
What did you see with regard to her affection toward Eric in the earlier visits?
For example, there was one time when I'm sorry. I tried to hug Eric one time, and she told me that I wasn't supposed to hug him, that he needed to grow up, that he was being too much of a baby.
Which visit was this?
82,
So he would have been 11 years old.
yes.
Did you see her hug the kids?
Not that time, not in 82, 83 visit.
Did she hug them? Did she hug Eric earlier?
Yes, she did, when putting them to bed.
And what about Lyle? Did you see her hug Lyle?
Not during the 82, 83 visit. There was more animosity between the two.
Would you see her hug him on the earlier visits?
Just when putting him to bed occasionally.
And did she speak to them gently using pet names or?
No, there weren't no pet names.
Was she caring of them in terms of if they got injured?
No, they were supposed to be tough.
Were they allowed to cry?
Crying was considered a weakness.
Was that even for you? Or were you?
I'd say in general, showing emotion in that household was considered a great weakness that you didn't want to display.
And what would happen if the boys would cry?
Gosh, they'd either be sent to their room or left alone.
Was there a difference between what the family did in private, and I'm talking particularly about the later visits, a difference between the way they would behave in private and the way they would behave in public?
Are you referring to Kitty and Jose?
Yes.
There was a terrific difference between private and public.
And what was the difference? Let's do Kitty first. What was the difference in Kitty's public versus her private performance?
Objection irrelevant.
Let's have the question read back, please.
And what was the difference as to Kitty first? What was the difference in Kitty's public versus her private performance?
Be a little more specific when you're talking about performance,
Thank you.
please.
What was Kitty's behavior like in the home versus in public?
At home, she was very harried when no one was around, and generally unhappy, and just never could quite keep up, and frustrated all the time. In public, she would put on a facade, a personhood of who she believed she should appear to be as the
Objection sustained as to the entire answer as a conclusion, and the entire answer is stricken.
How would she, you said at home she'd appear frustrated and harried, etc. Would she demonstrate her
Okay.
temper at home?
Okay. Yes.
And when she went out in public, did she appear harried and frustrated and demonstrate her temper?
No.
And what was Jose like in the home versus in public? First, what was his behavior like at home?
He was in non-questionable control of the household, and he was he would laugh in a arrogantly teasing way, but he'd be humiliating and belittling to the point of being cruel at times.
And what about in public? Did he demonstrate any of those behaviors in public?
No.
Were you afraid of making mistakes in that home?
Sustained.
What would be the consequences of making a mistake in that home?
Sustained.
If you made a mistake, how would Kitty treat you?
All right, you have to lay a better foundation as to the presence of the defendants and nature of the conduct.
Were there times when you were living in the home, particularly directed at the later visits, where you would make a mistake and Kitty would react to that in front of the boys?
Yes.
And can you tell me what would happen?
Objection based time.
Sustained.
In the 1982-83 visit, did this ever happen?
Oh, yes.
Did it happen frequently?
Yes.
And what would Kitty do in front of the boys during the 1982-83 visit if you made a mistake?
If it wasn't too bad, it would be throwing things around and as she was yelling at me, just slamming things down while talking to me, yelling at me about what it was and how could I do this and how stupid it was.
And if it was something really bad?
It would be the rage that I have already described to you, beyond control.
How old were you in 1982?
I was 23.
Was that rage still frightening to you?
Oh, yes, very. I lived in fear of it, to be honest with you.
Would there be times during the last visit where Jose would go to Eric's room before dinner
Yes,
and meet with him privately?
yes.
And after those meetings, what would Eric be like when he came out?
Jose would state that Eric was not feeling well and that he was not able to eat his dinner at that time and that he would eat later.
And did you see times where Lyle and Jose would have talks?
Yes.
And where would these talks take place?
Frequently downstairs. This is during 82, correct?
Yeah.
Frequently downstairs in the basement with Lyle on a stool and Jose standing over him.
How close would Jose stand to him?
He would be right here up against him.
Indicating approximately a foot away?
Generally, yes.
And could you tell what it was they were these discipline sessions or were they just talking about things?
It was understood that when Jose was speaking to Lyle or either of the boys that they were to be left alone and you didn't intrude.
How long would these talks in the basement go on?
An hour, 2 hours.
And is this something that happened just once while you were there?
No, it was frequently,
And what is
and
frequent?
it was serious. It could be once a week.
And that's in the 82, 83 visit you're talking about.
Yes,
Did talks like this take place on earlier visits?
yes, but not for quite as long.
And starting in, say, 1976, when Lyle's 8, are these similar types of talks taking place?
Yes,
And how long would they last at that age? You said they were shorter.
yeah, they could be shorter in length up to about an hour, but they wouldn't probably go to 2 hours at that point.
And at some point between 76 and 82, they went to 2 hours.
Yes,
And would he have talks with him in other locations? Dinner table, living room?
always at the dinner table.
And what was it like at the dinner table?
Sustained.
During the 1982, 83 visit, what was it like at the dinner table?
An intellectual drill in a rapid quiz-like fashion.
Was this every night?
If Jose were home, yes.
And who would be being drilled?
Generally, Lyle, Eric would try to answer, but since Lyle's 3 years older, Eric had a hard time keeping up.
And what happened if you didn't know the answer?
Your intelligence was attacked.
Now, did these dinner table conversations take place on earlier visits?
Yes,
And you said you were there in 76, 78, and 80. Did they take place on all 3 of those visits?
yes.
What would happen if the boys cried?
Why don't you be more specific?
Okay. Was there some objective, some purpose in keeping the boys from crying? Some goal?
Sustained.
Did they ever indicate verbally, either Kitty or Jose, why it is you weren't supposed to cry?
Crying is a weakness,
And they weren't supposed to be weak?
and weaknesses are not allowed
Did you drive with Kitty ever?
very often.
And how was her driving?
We drove through the entire state of Pennsylvania at 95 miles an hour with the boys in the car.
That was one incident. Was that an exception?
That was by that time, that was only 1976, and I had already accustomed myself to her style of driving at that time.
And
Yes, that was to answer your question.
it was the way she usually drove?
Yes.
Was it frightening to drive with her?
It could be at times, yes.
Did it appear that either of the boys cared what their dad thought about them?
They both cared very, very much.
And how could you tell that?
They were always seeking his approval.
And when Lyle would be having these talks with his dad, what would he look like physically?
His shoulders he would be in this type of a position with his head down and being very serious and looking sad.
Shoulders hunched forward? Is that what
Yes,
you did? And
uh-huh.
head down,
Yes.
hands in lap?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Was Jose home most weekends?
Jose was,
Or did it vary? with the
it
visits?
varied and it varied with the visits because his positions had changed.
Was he home most weekends in 76?
Actually, he was gone frequently during 76.
And what about 78, 80, and 82?
He was home on more weekends during those visits.
And was there a routine pattern over this entire period of time in terms of how weekend days would be spent? In terms of Jose and
Oh,
the
okay.
boys?
Yes, very much so.
And what
yes.
was the routine?
If Jose were home, when he arrived, he would immediately take the boys out while they were involved in tennis. This was more later visits than the earlier visits. And they would drill immediately when he got home. He would change and they'd be on the court. And but you're only asking me during the week, right?
That was the week. Let's do the weekend now. Say Saturdays. What would Saturdays be like? What would the pattern be?
Sustained.
19, you said it was most common in the later visits, 80 and 82?
Yeah.
That he would be home?
Yes.
Okay. And so during those two visits, was the pattern on Saturday the same?
Yes.
And was the pattern on Saturday during the other visits the same? It's just that he wasn't home as much.
Correct.
So what was the pattern?
They would get up first thing in the morning and they'd be on the court. They'd be drilling. And they would take a break after a couple of hours and get either some liquid and then after a couple hours they'd have something to eat and then they'd be back on the court.
Okay, so they would be drilled for a couple of hours,
Minimum, yeah.
2 to 3 hours.
With each set.
What do you mean with each set? With each boy?
Between breaks.
Okay. And between the first and the second set of drilling, between the first 2 hours and the second 2 hours, they'd take a break. Is that right?
Yes.
And how long a break would they take?
They'd storm into the house and storm right back out is how I remember it.
10 minutes, half hour?
About 10 minutes maybe.
And so then they would have the second 2 hour session.
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yes, I'm sorry.
And then would that be the end of the tennis or?
No, they could easily go all day long into the evening.
And this was taking place even in 1976? Or
I don't recall in 76 as much.
Okay.
And they were still in swimming also at that time.
And after they spent all this time on the tennis court, what would they do? Would this be late afternoon, early evening by the time they came in?
Yes.
Okay. And what would they do when they came in?
They would come in and I'm not sure what point they grabbed something to eat. Then they would head upstairs for showers
Okay. Would they take showers individually or together?
together.
And was this true on all of the visits, including the 82 to 83 visit?
Including 82, 83 visit, yes.
And after they all showered together, what would they do next?
I would see them come out, all three of them each of them in their robes. And the three of them would go into the den area where they would sit, which was adjoining the master bedroom. And the three of them would sit on the floor with Jose, teaching them generally about history, specifically Roman history, and telling them of the importance to know history and why and other things related to history.
How long would these talks go on for?
An hour or two, generally until it was time for them to go to bed.
The boys looked like they were having a good time?
They looked like they were intent on learning what their father was trying to teach them.
And I've just marked 4 photographs. 164, 5, 6, and 7. Vander Molen, showing you what I've marked now as 164. Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes.
And who's in that photograph?
This is Kathy in the corner, and
Is Kathy your sister?
Kathy is my sister. This is myself, and I know this child. I can't think of him.
Okay, so there's an unidentified child in there.
Who's on my lap, and this is Lyle and Eric.
And so if Kathy's there,
That
is
was my
this,
birthday.
this is your birthday?
I think so. Yeah.
What month is your birthday?
My birthday is July 2nd.
So if Kathy's there, is this the 76th visit
Yes,
showing you what I've now marked as 165? Do you recognize that picture?
yes, yes.
And who's in that?
That's myself and Lyle and Eric.
And is this the same occasion?
Yes.
Showing you what I've marked as 166 and ask if you recognize that photograph.
That's Kitty and myself.
You can hold it.
That's Kitty and myself.
And when was that?
Looks like the 76 visit also.
And while you were living there on any of the visits, did they have a ferret as a pet?
There was, yes, I believe they did throughout the visits. Chippers 1, 2, and 3.
That was the ferret's names? Chippers 1, 2, and 3?
Yes,
Showing you what I've marked as 167.
that's a ferret.
That's a ferret.
That's one of the chippers.
Okay.
If this was 76, it would be chipper 1.
Was the ferret kept in the house, or are these pets that you put out in the backyard, or what?
The ferret was kept inside the house.
And was the ferret trained to go to the bathroom in a litter box or something like
Mm.
that?
No, none of the ferrets were. They went to the bathroom wherever they ended up being.
Is that anywhere in the house?
Anywhere in the house, yes.
Did the boys behave differently when they were just with you as opposed to when they were with their parents?
Yes, they did.
How did they behave when they were just with you?
It seems that it was the only time that I saw them actually behave as children, as boys. They were much less competitive when it was just the three of us. They were nice to each other, nicer. We relaxed. We talked about things that weren't talked about when we weren't by ourselves, such as hopes and desires and dreams that they had themselves.
These were things that they couldn't talk about or didn't talk about with their family, their own hopes and dreams.
Sustain.
Would they talk about their hopes and dreams in front of their parents?
Generally speaking, their roles were being given to them.
Objection sustained. The answer is stricken as non-responsive.
When they would be around their parents, who would pick the topic of conversation?
Jose.
You already indicated that the boys were not encouraged to show emotions, is that correct?
Correct.
Was that a goal to be achieved, to not be able to show your emotions?
Yes.
Did the family take pictures?
Yes.
Who took pictures?
When I was there, I took a lot of them or handed my camera to someone. Otherwise,
Did they
I
both
think it
take
was,
pictures?
yes.
One of them, or? If you remember.
I don't recall.
They have a Polaroid camera?
Yes.
Did they have a movie camera?
Yes.
And who would use the movie camera?
Jose.
And what types of things would he film?
He filmed the boys.
Doing what?
I recall them doing sports. I can't remember what else right now.
When Jose wasn't home, where would the boys sleep?
In which visit?
Start in 76. If you remember,
Generally speaking, in 76, I remember putting them to sleep in their beds. Sometimes they slept with Kitty.
and through your later visits, did they continue to sometimes sleep with Kitty?
Yes, they did. And they'd argue over whose turn it was.
And did this continue into the last visit in 1982, 1983?
Yes, it did.
And at that time, the boys would have been 14 and 11?
Yes. Then they turned 12 and 15.
Did you observe anything unusual that happened when Lyle would go to take a bath? Just yes or no?
Yes.
And when was this?
During the 82, 83 visit.
So again, where he's 14.
Yes.
What would happen when he would go take a bath?
After he would be in the bathroom, Kitty would tell me that she had to go help him wash his hair.
Would she go into the bathroom?
Yes.
And how long would she be in there?
Until she would help him finish up his bath and they'd come out.
5 minutes, 10 minutes?
It could, about 15 minutes.
Did you observe Kitty helping the boys with their homework?
Yes.
And would this have been in the 1982, 83 visit?
Yes.
And how is it that she would help the boys with their homework?
She would sometimes sit and do it with them. Sometimes she would do it while they were out practicing their tennis.
So she would do their homework for them sometimes?
Yes.
During the times when she would work with them, what were those episodes like?
Sometimes she would get frustrated with them if they asked for help, and she'd end up taking over the homework herself.
And would she ever say anything to them about?
She would, she'd ask them how they could be such a dummy. Lyle and Eric use their intelligence. She would yell that at them quite frequently. And then if they still didn't get it, that's when she started calling them dummy.
Did they have any friends come over and visit during any of the visits you were there? Were other neighborhood children in the house?
I didn't see any neighborhood children, no.
And was there a particular cousin who was close to Eric who would come visit?
Yes, Andy.
And other than Andy's visits, did you see any other friends or any other relatives stay in the house?
No.
Did Eric and Andy appear to be close?
Yes.
Was privacy something that was valued in this house?
Objection irrelevant.
Sustained as to the form of the question.
Did you see any instances in which there was a disrespect for privacy shown?
Yes.
Same objection, Your Honor, with striking it.
Objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
Did you ever see a situation in which Kitty went into Lyle's room and read his letters?
Yes, I did. And I was with her when she did that.
Your Honor, objection with the strike as being irrelevant.
Overruled. We have a foundation as to time, please.
82, 83 visit.
During the 82, 83 visit, did Lyle get a girlfriend?
No, I asked about that one time, and Kitty said that there would be time for the boys for Lyle specifically, to be concerned about that some other time.
All right. Objection is sustained. The answer is stricken after the word no.
Did Lyle have stuffed animals?
Many, yes.
When you say many, are you talking about 2 or 3? Or?
No, he had at least a dozen or more.
And does this include the 82, 83 visit when he's 14 and 15?
Yes, that's specifically what I'm remembering.
Would you see him playing with his animals?
Yes, he animated his animals, especially Cookie Monster.
And what type of playing would go on? Was he having them sing and dance, or what was
No,
happening?
they bombed each other in groups. Bombed each other, and Cookie Monster would threaten more towards Eric. Yeah.
Was it?
All right, we'll take a recess when the jurors wants a break. So we'll take a recess and we'll resume at 1:45. Don't discuss this case with anyone or form any final opinions about it, and we'll resume at 1:45.
There's some testimony about that, and so there's been some testimony.
Well, number one, the people did not specifically object to the testimony regarding the swimming or the nature of that activity on grounds of relevancy. And now the defense is offering this film. I haven't seen it, and the people have not seen the entirety of it.
I've seen enough.
Right. Well, she just told me she didn't see it all.
She said she didn't even.
Counsel, I heard her say that she didn't see it all, and that's all I'm saying. She hasn't seen the entirety of it. The objection is on the grounds of relevancy. Is that correct? Do you want to articulate it further as to?
Yeah, all it proves is that they took pictures of the child swimming back and forth and driving. And it seems to be irrelevant or unnecessary to show this particular movie to the jury, that's all.
Your objection is it's cumulative, or? All right, I'll have to see it, and I'll do it at a more appropriate time. It's 4:00. I want to continue with the examination of this witness. How much more do you have? Okay, and I don't know how you proposed, if this was to be played, how you propose to play it. We're not going to darken the courtroom for the purpose of playing it. No, we're not.
I'd ask the bailiff if he could turn the light.
Well, we're not darkening this courtroom in a criminal case. If you wanted to put this on videotape, you could have done that, and we could have had a VCR with this as well.
We may have no
I
VCR.
don't know why we need a projector. It's one of those devices that people don't see very often anymore.
I know it's a very old movie, but we can waive their appearance during the showing of the movie, so there's no security problem, or they can wait for long.
Well, I'll see at the appropriate time. Let's remove the equipment so it doesn't interfere with the rest of the testimony, and then I'll view it at the appropriate time.
Yeah, you still have to do a 402 on the statement that
Yes.
is highlighted, and I don't know whether the court
We
wants
can do that right now.
to. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Lansing?
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Vander Molen, was there an incident in 1976 in which Lyle Menendez asked you to help him?
Yes, there was.
Where did this take place?
In my bedroom downstairs in the basement
What
in
time of,
Muncie.
I'm sorry.
In Muncie.
In Muncie. What time of day was it?
It was nighttime.
And what happened?
We had all been down, Lyle and Eric and I had been downstairs, and the boys had been called up to get ready for bed. I stayed and went into my bedroom. And a while later, Lyle came down, and he was asking if he could, I thought he was there to say goodnight. And he started asking me if he could sleep down there because Kathy had already gone and there was 2 single beds.
Okay. And what did you tell him?
Initially, pretty much just brushed him off because I wasn't taking him seriously.
And what happened next?
He proceeded to indicate to me by touching himself down and saying that his dad and him had been touching each other down there.
And what did he ask you to do?
He wanted to sleep down there.
And what did you do?
I went and got Kitty and brought her downstairs and told her what was going on.
How did Lyle seem at this time? Was this a joke? Or did he-
No, he was serious.
And what happened when Kitty came down?
She didn't believe me.
Did you tell her?
Yes, I told her what I believed to be going on, what Lyle was indicating to me. And she immediately, I don't remember that she said anything to me, just that I knew that she did not believe me. And she took Lyle and brought him back upstairs.
When you say she took him, did she
She
physically grab him?
she took him by the arm and brought him back upstairs with her.
And did you ever discuss the incident with Lyle anymore?
No, it wasn't ever discussed after that.
Thank you. That's our offer. Proof, Your Honor.
All right, people wish to examine?
Yes, Ms. Vander Molen, do you remember giving a statement about this incident on January the 15th of 1992?
Yes.
And who did you give the statement to about this?
to Leslie and Abramson and to Joe Lansing.
And at the time that you gave the statement, did you indicate to them that Lyle had gestured to himself?
I believe I motioned about the touching. I'm not sure what you're meaning by that, though.
Well, in the report it indicates that all she, meaning you, knows is that he made some comment about Jose and touching. And the next part of the report is that you went and got Kitty.
Right.
Is that what you told the defense attorneys in January of '92?
I told them,
I'm gonna object to this because I don't think this is maybe cross-examination, but I don't think this is appropriate for a position.
Overall, I'll permit it.
okay. I discussed that it was regarding touching, and at the same time that I discussed that, I indicated so by doing that in their presence.
And where did you touch yourself?
Down, basically right here, since I'm not in.
You cut your genitals?
Yes.
All right. And you told the defense attorneys that in January of '92?
I verbalized touching, and I motioned by doing so with my hand, but I don't know what was written. So
And you have a clear recollection today of Lyle doing that?
yes,
And you remember telling the defense attorneys that you were never really sure what it was about?
that's what I convinced myself of afterwards, that I must have been mistaken because of the way that it was handled.
What exactly did Lyle say to you?
That I don't remember exact words. I just remember that it was regarding he and Jose touching each other, and it was down there.
You know, when you spoke to the defense attorneys, all you said was a comment about Jose and touching. Okay?
Indicating down there.
Right.
What page is that now?
Pardon?
What page?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's page 4. It's not numbered. We know
Okay. What?
The last paragraph where you want
Okay.
the beginning of the next page.
I know I read it, I just can't find it at this point.
The sentence that I'm referring to specifically starts, all she knows is that he made some comment about Jose and touching.
That's on the fifth page.
That's on the floor.
Sorry.
All she knows, perhaps, is referring to the fact that I don't remember exact words.
And did you have any impression about how recently this had occurred in Lyle's life?
That it had been. It was not. It was something that I didn't get the impression that it just happened, but that it was happening.
Right, but he didn't verbalize anything more than he wanted to stay with you?
Right.
And
Because of this. Because he was afraid.
Well, did he say he was afraid? Or
No, that's my impression.
All right, so he asked to sleep with you, and you said no. And then in response to that, he indicated to you that something.
I was pretty much ignoring him. I was not taking him seriously until he became serious.
All right, and then you didn't ever, now when's the first time you ever told anyone about this?
Lord, I'm gonna object to this. This is impeachment if it's valid.
Well, the only problem is, normally you would be correct, but the only problem is that this is an interview conducted by the two defense lawyers. There's no third-party witness available to deal with the interview you conducted, so I'm giving the prosecution latitude in this regard.
Well, there was nobody present for Dr. Oziel's interviews, and he was free to make up anything he liked on the witness stand.
Dr. Oziel's interviews with whom?
With the defendant.
Well, I don't know if that's quite analogous. I kind of think it isn't, counsel. And I'm sure your smiling remark indicates that you agree with me. So
Well,
that's why I'm permitting the prosecution to go into this. You conducted an interview without any third-party witness present, and now you're seeking to introduce the testimony relating to this, and it's very difficult for the prosecution to deal with that since they'd have to call you as witnesses. That's why I'm permitting the prosecution to do this. Go ahead.
Who's the first person you ever told about this?
Joe Lansing.
She started to say.
Yeah.
Besides Kitty herself. I mean,
Right, you told Kitty and then you told Miss Lansing, and between 1976 and 1992, you didn't tell anyone else. Is that
no,
correct?
that's correct.
All right, anything else?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, did counsel wish to argue the matter?
Your Honor, it's our position that this is admissible on several grounds. One, of course, is fresh complaint. I think there can be no question that it was directed at something that was going on. He didn't want to go upstairs that night out of fear. So he's not reporting something that happened a substantial period of time before. The second is the state of mind with regard to what Lyle knew about his father, what his experiences were, so he's not likely to have forgotten, and was part of what was happening to him in the last week when his brother tells him he's been molested, and why that is believable to Lyle.
Yes.
Could I throw in a few sections of the evidence?
As long as it's not unconscionably long.
All right. A couple of additional grounds from the fresh complaint theory is for the non-hearsay purpose, and we cited the Brown case, which also indicates that the non-verbal conduct that she explained would be relevant on fresh complaint theory. The second basis is under Evidence Code Section 1202, which talks about evidence relevant to impeaching a hearsay declarant. And the court will recall that the prosecution elicited from Dr. Oziel that the Menendez brothers did not complain about sexual abuse to him in his sessions of October 31st and November 2nd. Evidence Code Section 1202 says, any other evidence offered to attack or support the credibility of a hearsay declarant is admissible if it would have been admissible had the declarant been a witness at the hearing. So in other words, it's our theory that the hearsay declarants in this case are the brothers. The statement put into evidence through Oziel was that they did not complain on those two dates. If they were testifying as witnesses under this section, we would be entitled to elicit a prior inconsistent statement that they did in fact complain at a time prior to the time that they maintained their silence according to the prosecution's theory. So under 1202, I think the complaint would be admissible to support the credibility of the declarants. And then lastly, or actually two more arguments, Evidence Code Section 1241 says, evidence of a statement is not made inadmissible by the hearsay rule if the statement A is offered to explain, qualify, or make understandable conduct of the declarant, and B was made while the declarant was engaged in such conduct. So our theory would be that the verbal complaint is admissible under 1241 to explain the conduct of touching himself and requesting that he be with the witness in bed. And then lastly, under Evidence Code Section 1250, which is the state of mind exception, it applies not only to state of mind, but it says evidence of a statement of the declarant's then existing state of mind, emotion, or physical sensation, including a statement of mental feelings, pain, or bodily health, is not made inadmissible. And it's our contention that this would be a statement of bodily health, pain, and in addition, a statement of state of mind.
All right, what's the people's response?
Evidence Code Section 1252 governs the admissibility of evidence under 1241 and 1250. Under 1250.
Well, let's deal with the fresh complaint.
Your Honor, I'm not going to argue that the recent change in law as to whether or not it's in response to a question, but more that there's no showing that this is in fact fresh, and that it is unreliable because of the fact that there's no way to determine at this time whether or not this is in fact a fresh complaint or an older complaint. The impressions of the witness are not sufficient in foundation to make this in fact a fresh complaint.
And that's your only objection or response to the offer as far as fresh complaint?
Well, we'd also ask that it be limited, not for the truth of the matter asserted, but just to show that in fact such a complaint was made, and that it should not be offered for the truth of the matter asserted, but just the fact of the complaint.
All right, on the theory that it does seem to qualify as a fresh complaint, the court would permit it, not offered for the truth of the matter asserted, but just the fact that the statement was made. Are we ready to proceed otherwise?
We are now.
Okay,
Oh, excuse me, Your Honor, there was one other thing. that I
yes.
brought up. This should, it's also our opinion, this should not be in front of the Eric Menendez jury. It only goes to the present complaint of allowing Menendez and not to Eric Menendez.
Your Honor, I would object to that because the fact that they elicited from Dr. Azil that there was no complaint in either way about sexual molestation, the fact that they're charged with conspiracy, the fact that they're charged with premeditation and planned murder, the fact that Dr. Briere was challenged on the notion that abuse is made up. I think they put the defendants in the same basket and they're both entitled to the jury hearing this evidence.
Well, it's a statement made by Lyle Menendez as to a complaint relating to him. And my question of the Eric Menendez counsel is, why is it, I've heard your statements, but I still don't follow quite why it's relevant as to his defense.
It explains why Lyle Menendez ultimately molested Eric Menendez, which, as we heard from Dr. Briere, is a typical symptom of a molested child. And we will be presenting evidence that at this time, and shortly before this time, Lyle Menendez was molesting Eric Menendez.
And how is that evidence going to be introduced?
Through Eric Menendez's testimony.
Lyle Menendez is not going to testify about that,
Yes, he is, Your Honor.
He is also going to testify.
and it's expected this will be before both juries.
I'm not sure how we're going to decide that. It depends on how the court deals with joint testimony. But my point is that it will corroborate Eric Menendez's testimony that he was molested by his brother. Moreover, Your Honor, it shows a pattern, and our experts will testify that there is a pattern among pedophile incest perpetrators that they don't just pick on one kid in the family. And it corroborates Eric's testimony that at the age of 6, his father began molesting him. The fact that he molested Lyle at the same age, 6 to 8.
All right,
And they-
I had not heard the defense intended to offer any evidence regarding pedophiles. My understanding was you had an expert who would testify, as this previous witness Briere did, that there is no pattern of pedophilia, no particular type of individual.
No, Your Honor, that has to do with the profile of the particular individual, but the profile of incest in families, what the research shows is that they don't usually just pick on one kid. It's far more common there is incest being practiced on more than one child. And what's common is that they begin with the oldest and then work their way down the line.
Well, whether that's admissible or not, in this case, has not been litigated yet.
Moreover, there's been constant allegations by the prosecution. The whole theory here is that there's joint fabrication of evidence, joint fabricating of an alibi, joint false statements to the police, where they're giving the same story. They have locked them together in joint lying, and therefore, if there's individual truth telling, that should also be admissible before both juries.
Well, you can remember those words if there is a time in the future when you attempt to argue that some testimony offered by one defendant should only be received as to that one defendant. What is the people's response?
People's response is in light of the fact that there's no guarantee that either defendant will testify or that they're going to testify in front of both juries, that there still is a division among the defendants and that this particular testimony at this time, as of today, is only relevant as to the Lyle Menendez jury.
Well, Your Honor, I'm willing to live with it. If my client doesn't testify, they can strike this testimony vis-a-vis my jury and admonish them to disregard it for the limited purpose for which it's coming in to begin with. But I swear and promise, Scout's honor, my client's going to testify.
Well, I think this whole issue is being blown out of all proportion, that somehow there's some linkage between molestation, if there was one, and the killings that occurred in this case, that there's somehow, if the defense proves there is a molestation or has been a molestation, that somehow that establishes a defense in the case. That doesn't prove anything. Doesn't prove anything as far as a legal defense.
Well, it certainly proves that when our clients testify that it was the threat to expose this molestation that brought about the death threats from their parents, that maybe they'll be believed.
I'm not talking about that aspect of it. I'm talking about whether or not, in fact, there was a molestation. That doesn't constitute a legal defense.
Well, we don't say that it does, Your Honor, that the mere fact that there was molestation constitutes a legal defense. We have never said that. We have never said that because you're abused, you're justified in killing your abuser. We didn't argue that, and we never will. But we will show that with the effects of molestation on children, and it is a critical sub-issue in this case, that our clients, when they testify with their sexual exploitation, are believed.
All right. At this point, we're arguing whether or not this evidence should be admitted as to both defendants, as to whether it should be limited just to the declarant. And
There's another aspect too.
yes.
There's another aspect. When, and this is by way of an often proof, when Eric was 10 and Lyle was 13, Lyle, because of his own experience of having been molested by the father, came to understand that Eric was being molested based on what he heard and what he saw in the room next door. And at that point, Lyle went to his father and had a confrontation with him, seeking to dissuade him from further molestation of Eric. And Eric received a very severe beating as a result, because Mr. Menendez thought that Eric had told Lyle, which Eric had not done. Therefore, the fact that Lyle was molested, which is what informed his knowledge that Eric was being molested, is relevant in front of Eric's jury as well.
All right. As far as whether it's admissible as to both defendants, it's being offered as an exception to the hearsay rule, and the issue is just relevance and nothing else. And based upon the posture of the case as it's been presented so far, it does seem to have relevance as to each defendant, and therefore the court would permit it as to each defendant. All right, is there anything else now before the juries come in? All right, then let's get the jury panels in. We have about 10 minutes yet to go today. And all our jurors are back now. You may resume with the examination of the witness.
Ms. Vander Molen,
Yes.
was there an incident in 1976 while you were staying with the Menendez family involving Lyle and the conversations that you had with him?
Yes.
And what time of day was this?
It was night.
And what had you been doing?
Lyle and Eric and I had been downstairs.
I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Lyle, Eric, and I had been downstairs playing ping pong. And the two boys were called upstairs to get ready for bed.
Who called them upstairs?
Jose.
And what happened next?
I stayed and went into my bedroom, which was downstairs.
Is that in the basement?
Yes.
Okay.
And a while later, Lyle came down. I believed he was there to tell me goodnight.
Okay. You say a while later. How much longer?
Within the hour.
And he came down.
And he came downstairs and he started asking if he could spend the night in the other bed. We had two twin beds and Kathy had left by then.
So there was an empty bed.
Right.
Okay. So he's asking if he can spend the night in the bed. And what do you
Right.
do?
I did not. I pretty much ignored him and brushed him off at first. I thought he was just goofing around.
He's an 8-year-old kid and you didn't take it seriously?
Right.
Okay. And what happened after that?
He became more serious and indicated to me that he was afraid of not sleeping downstairs
Why?
because he and his dad had been touching each other, and he indicated that it was in his genital area.
And so why did he want to sleep downstairs?
Did he
Just
say
because
anything as to why?
I don't recall what
All
he
right,
said.
your next question then.
When he said this, did he seem like he was kidding around or did he seem
No, he
serious?
was serious.
And what did you do?
I went and got Kitty and brought her downstairs and told her what was going on.
You took it seriously enough to go get Kitty then?
Yes,
Overruled.
yes, I did.
And did you tell Kitty what Lyle had told you?
Yes, I told her what he had indicated to me, what he was telling me, what he was showing me.
How did she look? Did she look shocked or did she show any emotion?
She showed that she did not believe me.
What did she do?
Kind of in a there's a look that she got when she didn't believe me. And that's just, it was obvious to me that she did not believe me. She went and got Lyle and took him back upstairs.
Now, when you said he pointed, did he point somewhere while he was just, could you
He
stand
touched
up?
him.
I know,
He touched himself down here.
in the genital area.
Yes.
Now, when you said that to Kitty, did she say anything to you
I
or
didn't-
ask any questions?
No, she immediately did not believe me. I don't recall that she said anything to me.
Did she ask Lyle any questions? Like, has this been happening?
No.
Or how could
Oh,
you say
gosh.
this? Or
No. She just took him upstairs. So
How
it
did
was
she take-
dismissed.
how did she take him upstairs?
She took him by the arm,
She pull him out of the room
leading him out. Yes.
forcefully or gently, or
And more forcefully.
was he taken out of there quickly?
Yes.
How did he look?
Bewildered.
Did you talk to anybody about it after that?
No,
Why not?
because it was never discussed after that. And I convinced myself that I was in the wrong, that I was wrong. Not
having
sure
told-
why.
For having told Kitty that you were wrong?
Yeah.
All right, the statement attributed to Lyle Menendez is not being received, ladies and gentlemen, for the truth of whatever he said, just the fact that he said it to the witness. All right, any further questioning?
Yes, Ron.
Okay.
You okay? During any of the visits, did you observe Kitty drinking?
Yes, I did.
And which of the visits, if you can remember?
All of them.
And what would her pattern be about drinking? Would she drink all day long, or when would she drink?
Generally from the afternoon on, more so in the last visit than in the prior visit. She had specific liqueurs that I strongly remember in the 76 visit.
Okay.
Grand Marnier, Liqueur Galliano, and 45, which was from the Caribbean area.
And would she just have a small glass and sip it after dinner?
She
or
would
what
pour
the
it
pattern be?
in. She had it with her coffee, and she would pour probably about this much into her coffee,
Approximately 2 inches, Your Honor?
Appears more like an inch.
inch and a half. When she finished her coffee, sometimes she would pour the liqueur and sip on that by itself.
So she would pour some liquor into the coffee cup?
Yeah,
After that?
yes.
And
As she was drinking it.
would that be the same amount or more? Or-
I just recall watching her pour it into the coffee mug after she'd already been drinking it.
And this would start in the afternoon?
Yes,
And did this happen on a regular basis?
yes.
Would she sometimes have more than just the 1 cup of coffee and then the second?
Yes.
How many would you see her have?
2 or 3.
And was this an issue in the family? Did Jose drink with her?
In 76, it wasn't. In 82, 83, she was drinking more and she was starting to hide it from Jose.
And what would Jose do to check on whether she was drinking?
Sustained.
Would Jose say anything to her about her drinking?
He was teasing her.
Unless it was said in front of the defendant's objection sustained.
Was it said, were there
Yes,
ever
it
any
was.
discussions in front of Lyle and Eric about her drinking?
Yes.
And what
And they
was
were brought into them. He would tease her about it.
And tease her in terms of it's gentle teasing, it's a family joke, it's tolerated, or was
He said whatever he said, and he was always laughing, but it was generally a belittling type thing that he was saying, but he was always laughing. It was just his way.
Would he laugh when he was saying serious things?
Yes.
And was there anything about his laughter that made it seem less serious?
It was sometimes difficult to know whether he was serious or not because of his laugh, and I can't imitate it. But
How many times did you hear him talk to Kitty about her drinking in front of the boys?
several times throughout the last visit, 82, 83.
Did you find that in your first visit, Kitty seemed to be pleased with you, pleased with who you are, what you did?
Sustained.
It's foundational.
Well, let's get to the,
Did there come a period of time when Kitty became critical of you?
what time frame are you talking about?
Oh, that's what I need to ask.
All right. Again, it has to be something that occurred in front of the defendants.
Did there come a time when Kitty was critical of you in front of Lyle and Eric?
82, 83, very much so.
And what would the criticism be directed at?
I couldn't do enough. It just seemed like no matter what it was about, it wasn't enough.
You talked about the difference between how Kitty and Jose behaved in private versus how they behaved in public. Is that right?
Yes.
And did you ever go to any family functions during any of your visits with the Menendez family?
Yes.
And did you go more than once?
Yes.
A number of times?
Yes.
And would there be meetings or talks to you before those visits in terms of how you were to behave?
Yes, in the presence of the boys.
And would the boys get these same talks?
Yes, it was basically a family discussion at the table as to what was allowed to be discussed with others, particularly family relative members.
Okay. And what things, were there things that could not be discussed, you were not to disclose?
Their school performance, especially Eric's at the time.
Was Eric having trouble in school?
Yes, and that wasn't supposed to be known. And also, if they hadn't done well in a particular event, it wasn't supposed to be discussed.
Now,
There was because of the competition.
competition,
Right, because of the competition.
Objection sustained. The last part of the answer is stricken. And how much longer do you think you have, this witness?
I'll probably have another 20 minutes, Your Honor.
Okay, we'll take a recess and resume tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Ladies and gentlemen, don't discuss this case with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it. And we'll resume tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Witness is ordered to return. Counsel have indicated they had some matters they wanted to discuss before we resume.
I seem to be getting the flu or something like that, and so what I propose to the defense attorney is we finish Ms. Vander Molen, do Mrs. Anderson and Joan Vander Molen, and then do the 402 and send in. And into that time, we could recess for the day.
All right.
Just to clarify, our positions would have to be the testimony and misinformation in order to actually serve the counsel. And we don't get forward to this positive, I mean, there's still some things that we feel should be testified to. No matter what goes forward to.
Your proposal is to finish with Diane Vander Molen, is that it? And then Patty Anderson.
We want to do something to be effective.
And Patty Anderson, is that it?
And Joan Vander Molen.
And Joan Vander Molen.
Yes.
All right. Are there issues relating to their testimony prior to their testimony beginning?
Yes.
All right. in regards to McPhee, if we have testimony before the juries, I would prefer to finish any testimony before the juries before we get to her.
I understand.
Well, you said that you had some hearing that you wanted to do with her prior to the other testimony before the juries?
Well, we have hearings on all of these witnesses.
Well, but you won't be testifying today before the jury if she does testify, is that right?
She would, yes, I'm dramatic, but she can testify about in front of the juries.
Well, I didn't understand the people's request that you were prepared to have her testimony before the jury as well?
I didn't understand that, Your Honor, that is what they wanted to do. I think, well, let's just go as far as we can. I mean, I know she's here from out of town, and I know that this is the second time she's been here.
And her lawyer is here.
Well, all of that has been the result of the scheduling by the defense, knowing what your other witnesses have and will be. The situation, as far as your health and whether you feel that you're capable of proceeding, you'll have to let me know. I certainly can't
I understand.
tell you how you feel. You'll have to tell me.
Okay.
All right. Is there anything else that anyone wants to discuss?
The one matter with regard to,
Schedule it, let me just a minute.
oh, I'm sorry, just going to skip mine.
Yeah, I have this report announced tomorrow morning in Department 142, I should be here.
All right.
Okay.
Well, the only suggestion I would have, if it's possible, to put over till next Friday, because we have a juror who has to be in late next Friday morning.
The problem is, maybe I can't do that. Let me see if I can get another attorney to make the appearance for tomorrow and put it over for a week. I get the client to understand.
All right.
I'll try to do that at the recess.
Okay, it's my recollection we have one juror who has requested to come in at 11 o'clock next Friday, the 27th, I believe. All right, yes.
Your Honor, we discussed yesterday the issue of whether it would be admissible for Ms. Vander Molen to testify about the fact that she got pregnant, that Kitty wanted to have an abortion, and she did not have contact with her family. And my understanding was, or what I thought at the time, was that the primary objection was to the fact that it talked about Kitty talking about having an abortion, and that this, because people's feelings about abortion were so strong, that it would be prejudicial. What I would like to do, since that's the last time she saw the family and never went back, my proposal would be to just ask her if she saw the family after 1983 and have her indicate what happens to be the case, which is that she got pregnant, that the boys were not told, and that the Menendez family did not want anybody to know about it. And so she was forbidden to have any contact with the family after that. And not mention the abortion issue at all.
And the people's response?
Is that it's irrelevant, because there are kinds of issues involved in that kind of situation. It's irrelevant how they treated her in regards to her pregnancy.
It's the fact that this information was kept from the boys and part of the family secrecy program, that no one in the family, in the Menendez side of the family, was to know about this. And I think that the people did ask Alan Anderson when he was testifying about whether he went back and how often he went back and why he didn't go back anymore, and he did the same thing with Kathy Simonton. So I think that the juries heard questioning with regard to why there was no further contact. And there's an honest explanation for why there's no further contact.
All right, the people's objection is sustained. I don't find it has any relevance.
Okay, we're ready.
How much longer? You said about 10 or 15
No, I
minutes?
said about 45.
45 minutes, okay. And then is there going to be examination by the co-defendant, or you feel it's being covered?
I don't believe so unless something is left out.
Okay, and how long is the
About 15 minutes.
okay. All right, then let's have both juries come in and we'll proceed. Okay, we have all the jurors back in court, both juries. Good morning to you all. And we're ready to resume with the trial. we have a witness on the witness stand. If you can get her, Miss Lansing, and we'll proceed.
Did you get Diane? Did you get Diane from Diane?
All right, if you'd come back up on the witness stand, please. And would you say your name again for us?
Diane Vander Molen.
All right, I'll remind you, you're still under oath. You may continue your direct examination.
Thank you, Diane. Good morning. Good morning. Ms. Vander Molen, we were talking yesterday late in the day about the incident in which Lyle came down to your room and told you about what was happening with him and his father. Is that correct?
Yes.
And was that in 1976?
Yes, it was.
Your Honor, I have two exhibits, additional exhibits I'd like to mark.
The next exhibit number is 168.
168, I'm marking 168, which is a class picture for Cherry Lane School, 1976-1977, and an individual photograph of Lyle Menendez, which I'll mark as 169. Vander Molen showing you these two photographs. Do you recognize who that person is?
Yes, it's Lyle.
And does this appear to be the age that he was at the time that he made the complaint to you that you told us about?
Yes, pretty much.
After that incident, when is the next time you ever talked about it?
January of 1992
And who did you talk about it?
to yourself
And where was this?
in Denver.
Is that where you live?
Yes.
When the boys were growing up, were they given any lessons regarding the importance of their family heritage?
Yes, they both were by both Kitty and Jose. Jose used to talk about the special heritage that they were descended from and their need to carry on that heritage and to live up to it. And also Kitty used to talk about the special family that we came from and the importance of it.
And was there any emphasis on particular future plans? You should contribute to humanity or be an artist, or what was the goal that was given for these boys in terms of what they should do with their life?
Above and beyond anyone else. That's as close as I can. It was.
Okay. And were things like money and houses and cars and friends important?
That was a given.
What do you mean that was a given?
That was what was going to be their future. Was all of that the status, the highest status, the highest, the biggest, the most.
And were these values that you saw reflected in the parents in front of the boys?
With everything they were doing, yes.
And were they given instructions regarding choosing friends and what kind of people were the right people to have as friends?
Yes, I remember specifically at it, the dinner table, Jose and Kitty telling the boys how sometimes they may not like it if they chose who they could spend time with or not, or who their schoolmates could be they could be friends with at school, but that they had to understand how important it was that these friends would become known by them, and they would their life would be influenced by them, and how important it was that they direct themselves, even from a very young age, to be with the right people.
And did Kitty and Jose seem to incorporate that in their own lifestyle as well?
Sustain.
Did Kitty and Jose ever talk about their own selection of friends in front of the boys. That is the parents' friends.
There's no relevant.
Sustained.
Your sister testified yesterday that she had stayed with the Menendez family for part of a summer when you were there. Is that
In
correct?
1976.
And you are one of 5 children, is that correct?
Yes.
And did any of your other brothers or sisters stay at the Menendez house?
No.
And your cousin Alan, Brian Allen, but uses Alan,
Alan.
testified before you. Does he live in the same state as you?
No.
How long had it been since you had seen him before you saw him here this week?
It's been years.
In his years, 2 years or 5 years? Or?
I saw him in Princeton at the funeral, and prior to that, it had been when my son was born in 1984.
Do you talk to him regularly on the phone?
No, we do not.
And do you see your sister on a regular basis?
No, I do not.
You had told us yesterday about a friend of Eric's named Andy. Is
Yes.
that correct? And,
Also a cousin,
okay, and whose child is he?
Martes.
And now, did Andy stay for months at a time as you did? Or would he just come and visit, or do you know?
There was one time when he came for a couple of weeks, I think it was, but generally his visits were overnight visits once they moved into the area.
Do you remember an incident in 1983 in which Eric ran away?
Yes, the beginning of the summer of 1983.
And was there anything unusual about what happened?
There was, because he'd been gone for quite some time, and okay.
Your Honor, I'd like to mark this next in order.
170.
Thank you. Showing you that we've marked as 170. Does that look familiar to you?
Yes, it does.
And what is that?
That is a picture of Lyle and Eric in their canoe on the lake that they lived on.
Okay, now, was this a lake that was near their house?
Yes, their property bordered on the lake.
And you indicated that Eric ran away and there was a panic.
Yes.
And did the canoe have anything to do with it?
They, in looking for him,
They,
I'm sorry, Kitty and Jose,
okay,
discovered that the canoe was missing.
okay.
And what happened?
Jose took off in search of Eric and found him. They lived on the edge of the lake, and there was a creek that took off from there that fed into it. And Jose was gone for a while, and it was about dark when they got back, and Jose was furious, and Eric appeared to be crying. It was at the state of crying, if not crying still, and they were both soaking wet.
And were you ever told anything about what had happened?
You can answer that yes or no.
Was it ever explained to you what had happened?
Only where he had found him.
But not why he ran away or
No.
what had happened?
No.
You talked yesterday a little bit about Lyle and his stuffed animals.
Yes.
And did you see him interacting with the stuffed animals on all of your visits, or did it just happen during one of them?
Oops, sorry. On all of them.
Okay, so in your last visit when he was 14, he was still involved with the stuffed animals.
Yes.
And you said he would threaten Eric with Cookie Monster. Now, did he assault him with
No,
the animal?
it was a playful, joking, teasing type of interaction between the two of them.
And if Eric got mad at Lyle, would he take it out on the animals ever?
Yes.
What would he do?
He one time threw Cookie Monster out the window.
And was that very upsetting to Lyle?
Yes, it was.
When you were staying with them, did you ever have any discussions with Kitty about what your future was supposed to be?
She pretty much informed me what my future was going to be.
And was this done in front of the boys?
Yes.
And what was your future going to be?
Objection irrelevant.
Sustained.
Was she talking about your educational future, your career future?
Both.
Objection irrelevant, same.
Objection sustained.
Since you were living with the family, were some of the expectations that the boys experienced passed along to you?
Yes.
Irrelevant.
Sustained.
Was there ever an occasion in which Kitty, in front of the boys, lied about your academics?
Objection irrelevant.
Sustained.
Did Kitty ever tell people in front of
Sustained.
May we approach, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. You've told us about observing situations in which Kitty appeared to be dominated by Jose and intimidated by him. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, was that how she behaved with other people in front of the boys?
No.
And how would she behave with other people other than her husband?
She always gave the appearance of being in control and being the authority,
I'm sorry,
of being the authority with the boys, with other people.
one more time.
Being the authority with the boys, with other people.
Thank you. Did she seem to have a strong personality?
Yes.
Call for speculation of strike.
Can you be more specific as to what you're referring to? Objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
Did she appear to have her own views and to express them without any reservation?
Yes.
At what time or in what interaction or
During
relationship?
any of your visits, did you observe her in the presence of the boys express strong opinions, have strong views?
Question vague as to whether or not Mr. Menendez was there.
No, this is out of his presence, Your Honor.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
Yes, out of
All right.
his presence. Do you want me to ask you the question?
Yes, please.
Did you observe in any of your visits, and I will ask you which visits later, Kitty expressing strong views, being a dominant kind of person when Jose wasn't there?
Yes.
Now, was that an unusual occurrence, or was that what happened all the time?
That was how she was when, without him in her presence.
And was this during just one particular visit, or was it a pattern?
It was a pattern.
So it happened during all of the visits?
Yes.
Did she seem happy about having children?
No.
Did she talk to you about the damage children can do to a marriage?
Yes, she did.
Call for hearsay with the strike.
Sustained. The answer is stricken.
Did she talk to you in front of the boys about the damage children can do to a marriage?
She told me that children drive a wedge between their man and his wife, or husband and wife.
Was that in front of the
Both.
defendants? Was that said in front of the defendants?
Both.
Did it happen on more than one occasion?
Yes.
When Jose would have, did he ever have a?
Wait, what's that?
I didn't hear that last response at all, and I didn't hear the question.
Okay, let's have it read back.
Okay.
Question, did she talk to you in front of the boys about the damage children can do to a marriage? Answer, yes. She told me that children drive a wedge between a man and his wife, or a husband and wife. Report, was that in front of the defendants? Answer, both.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Did you ever have an occasion to have a conversation with Jose one-on-one the way that he would have those conversations with his sons?
There was one time when he was dropping me off on his way to work at the bus. Okay.
Objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
Okay.
Was there a particular form of physical behavior that would take place when Jose was talking to someone?
Yes.
That's irrelevant.
And did,
Right.
Overall,
did you observe this when he was having conversations with his sons?
Yes.
And did that ever happen to you? Did he ever have conversations with you one-on-one where there was a physical sense?
Yes.
Okay. Can you describe for me what it was? How would he sit? How would he look?
First of all, the first thing that comes to my mind is that his head would look down at you, and that there was this sideways glance.
Would he be close to you? Or close to
He
them?
would turn his head into you, depending on where you were sitting, yes.
And would there be a difference depending upon who was speaking, whether he would look at you or look away? If you remember? Would he look at you?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
When he was talking to you, would he look at you?
Judgment irrelevant.
talking in general or specific instances or what?
Well, do you remember any specific instances
He would look away.
when he was talking to you or when you were talking to him? Have I confused you thoroughly?
Yes.
During a conversation, he would speak and say one of the boys would speak.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? When Jose was speaking to one of the boys, would he be looking at them?
Yes.
When the boys responded or when you responded, would he continue to look at you or would he look away?
Judgment irrelevant.
Let's confine it to conversations with the defendants.
Okay.
The form of the question.
If you saw.
Do you understand the question?
Yes. He would continue to look at them.
Okay. And was there something very intense about these conversations?
Judgment calls for conclusion on part of the witness irrelevant.
Well, it's also vague. Objection sustained.
During the conversations you observed with the two boys, with Lyle and Eric, did the conversations appear to be of a lighthearted nature? People were joking, or did they appear to be very serious? How
No,
did they
it was
appear?
serious.
Well, objection sustained. The answer is stricken. Again, it's vague. We're talking about every conversation, what time frame, things of that nature.
During any of the visits, did you see one-on-one conversations between Jose and either of the boys?
Yes.
And did these occur on a regular basis?
Yes.
And when they occurred, were they always the same mood, or were there different types of conversations like this?
There were different types, but generally in the context that we're talking about, they were serious and the boys were intent on paying attention.
And was it the type of situation where you could interrupt or join in?
No.
Do you remember anything about a belt that was a particular object in that house of some importance?
Person asked me that.
I haven't asked this witness about the belt, Your Honor.
I believe you have, but objection, if you have something else to go on with this witness, I'll permit you to explore it.
Well, do you remember you remember the belt?
Yes, I do.
What do you remember about the belt?
I remember seeing it always sitting doubled over. It was doubled over and then lapped over on the top of Jose's dresser.
Okay. Do you have any other memories of that belt?
Not at this moment.
You never saw it used on the boys. Is that correct?
Not to my recollection, no.
And punishment always took place behind closed doors. Is that correct?
Yes.
Were you allowed to go down near the boys' rooms when Jose was in the room with his sons?
Asked me that.
Sustained.
Do you think you were treated badly in the later visits that you had with this family?
It's vague and conclusionary.
Sustained.
Your Honor, it's foundational. When you left in 1983, were you still on good terms with the family?
I was extremely unhappy.
And did you ever ask to go back?
No, I did not.
And did you after you left, engage in some activity which you thought would have met their approval?
Objection irrelevant.
Sustained.
Was their approval of you important even long after you left?
Yes,
Irrelevant.
Objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
After 1983, when is the next time that you saw Lyle and Eric Menendez?
at the memorial service in 1989.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Wait, can I have the last question reread, please? Not the answer to this question.
Oh, yeah.
Please, may I have the question?
I've already asked. Trust me.
Question, after 1983, when is the next time that you saw Lyle and Eric Menendez?
Thank you.
Right.
Your Honor, we do have the video, that 8mm has now been put on video, and
Okay, well, let's have the examination here first, and then we can come back to that. All right, is there any further direct examination on behalf of Eric Menendez?
No.
All right, cross-examination.
Ms. Vander Molen, I believe you've indicated that you had approximately 4 visits in the Menendez home. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And the first one was 1976, and it was something I think you testified that was you had been looking forward to.
Yes.
How would you categorize your stay that summer? Did you have a good time or a bad time, or was it mixed, or how was it?
That summer, it was a good time.
Okay. Were you treated well by Mrs. Menendez that summer?
Yes.
And how about Mr. Menendez? Did he treat you well?
I really did not develop a relationship, whether I can comment on that.
Was he around a lot during that summer that you recall?
He was frequently gone on trips, business trips during that time.
And when he was gone on business trips, would that be during the week, or would it include weekends, or can you recall?
It's tough to recall. I remember that he was gone a lot that summer, and there was really not that much interaction between he and I that summer.
Now, your sister was with you that summer for a period of about 2 months. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did your sister ever complain to you about not being happy there that summer?
Yes, a lot.
But you were happy, correct?
Yes.
And you went on trips during that summer
Yes, we did.
to Washington, D.C. and to New York?
Right.
And did you have a close relationship with the defendants during that summer as well?
Yes.
Did you spend time with them?
We did things together.
Did you ever do
Right.
things together with either one of the defendants without the parents being present? In other words, did you play with them or talk with them? Or
Yes.
okay. And so during that summer, you had a separate relationship with the defendants that did not always include the parents.
Yes.
Were you loving towards them?
Yes.
Did you ever hug them or kiss them or anything?
To the best of my recollection. Yes.
Then I believe when you left in August of 1976, you went home to where? Where did you?
To Arizona.
And then in the summer of 1978, from June the 1st until the 3rd week of September, you were again at the Menendez home. Is that correct?
Can you repeat the question, please?
All right. Between June 1st and the 3rd week of September of 1978, that was your second visit. Is that correct?
Yes.
So it was 2 summers after your first visit.
Yes.
Was that in the same house or was that in a different house?
That was in a different house.
And was that the Princeton Junction house?
Yes, and then we moved into the Pennington house.
How would you categorize your stay during that summer?
It was more or less a working. Kitty had a carpet cleaning business that I was employed in, and we were also busy making decisions on the house that was being built in Pennington and moving into it.
All right, so you were actually employed that summer, is that correct?
Yes,
And what year were you born in?
1959.
So you were being paid, is that correct?
Yes, I was working approximately 20 hours a week.
Now, when you returned that second time in the summer of 1978, were you looking forward to going back?
Yes,
Then I believe the third time you stayed was the following summer, but it was only for 2 weeks. Is that correct?
correct.
During your second visit, how would you categorize your time there? Did you have keeping in mind that you were working, did you still have a good time or did you have a bad time or?
I'm pretty neutral on how I felt either way.
All right. Now, between the summer of 76 and the summer of 78, did you have any other contact with the Menendez family? In other words, did you ever visit or speak with them on the phone or anything like that?
I spoke with them on the phone, yes.
Were you invited back for the summer of 78?
Yes,
And at the time that you were invited back, did you know that you would be working in the carpet cleaning business?
I don't believe I did.
Who paid your way from Arizona to Princeton? Do you recall the second summer?
My mother probably paid it. It would have either been myself or my mother.
And you were about 19 years old that summer, is that correct?
Yes.
Then the third week, I believe, when you went to the third summer when you went in 1979, did you go with a friend?
Yes.
And were you invited that time?
We asked if we could come, and we were told yes.
And that was a girlfriend of yours named Karen?
Yes.
And the Menendezes allowed you to come and stay for a couple of weeks?
Yes.
Now, during the first, the second, or the third summer, did you ever get charged rent or anything like that?
No.
You were a guest?
Yes.
The third summer, did you have a nice time while you were there, the 2 weeks? 1979, when you were with Karen.
Yes. Does housekeeping and gardening and so forth qualify for rental purposes?
Well, so you were asked to do chores. Is that correct?
To the nth degree.
And was that all the 3 times that we've been talking about?
Yes, increasingly so with each visit.
Okay. And by the summer of 1979, you were 20 years old. Is that correct?
Yes.
Then your last visit occurred from June of 82 until July of 83. Is that correct?
June of 82 to July of 83, yes.
Right. And at that time, you were more than just a summer house guest, correct?
Correct.
You were living there?
Yes.
And that was considered your residence during that period of time, correct?
Yes, it was.
Were you working?
I was working and going to school and maintaining the housekeeping and gardening and chauffeuring of the children.
Okay. Was it your understanding when you went to live there that you would be required to do chores and housekeeping and things like that?
I anticipated helping. If I may answer fully,
Sure.
They had a housekeeper that came 2 days a week that was cut back to 1/2 day upon my arrival. I was required to do all the maintenance around the yard work, which was a large yard, and also work full time and be responsible for taking the children to a lot of their tennis practices in Northeast Philadelphia after they got out of school, and also going to school.
Now, by the summer of 1982, when you arrived, had the family atmosphere changed from the first time you'd been there?
Yes, it had.
Okay. Why didn't you leave?
When I first arrived, I had no vehicle, and I'm not the type of person to give up, and I wanted to try to make something work of this, and I wanted to try to live back east. And it took me several months to I had 5 major goals, and it took me, which involved getting a car, getting money, getting a job, getting back into school, and so forth. And I was accomplishing those. And as soon as I was able, I moved out.
All right, so you weren't happy there, but you stayed anyway, is that correct?
Correct.
Now, going back to the summer of 1976, I believe you've indicated during that time period that the defendants were engaged in sporting activities, is that correct?
Yes.
And the father engaged in those activities with them in terms of either coaching them or taking them, is that correct?
Yes.
And the mother as well?
Yes.
Were you ever included in any of the sporting activities?
No, I was not.
While you were staying there during any of these 4 visits, did anyone ever hit you?
No.
Did you ever see either of the defendants hit by either of their parents during any of those 4 visits?
I saw Kitty shake Lyle physically
How many times?
a few in 1982-83 visit.
Prior to that time, had you seen either one of the defendants hit by their mother or their father?
I do not recall.
Did Mrs. Menendez appear to be under more stress as the years went on?
Yes, she did.
And was her behavior different around her husband than it was around you when you were alone?
Yes.
Did she appear to have an equal relationship with her husband, or was there an inequality that you could see?
He was final authority in the household. She tried her best to stand her ground.
I believe you indicated that her personality when she wasn't around her husband is that she had opinions and things like that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. With her husband, was she equally as strong-willed or opinionated?
She had definite opinions, but his was the final word.
And so she would acquiesce to him. Is that correct? She would give in to him?
Yes.
In 1976, when you were there the first time, you had a good time, and then in 1978, you still had a good time, except you were working, correct?
Right. Well, my relationship with Kitty was more or less it was real busy, and we just were constantly on the go, all of us.
And did you get along with her during the summer of 78?
I would say for the most part, but there was a lot of frustration already building within her that made it tough to feel close to her.
Were you sad when she died?
Yes.
Now, you've testified, and I've asked you as well about the fact that there was a lot of emphasis placed on sports. Is that correct in this family?
Yes.
Were Lyle and Eric good tennis players that you could see?
Yes.
And did they also appear to be able to speak on different topics? In other words, were they able to converse on different kinds of intellectual topics?
When I object to some of the questions of the
Okay, did Lyle Menendez appear to be able to speak on certain intellectual topics with his father in your presence?
Yes.
How about Eric Menendez?
Yes, although the more emphasis was given to Lyle regarding those things.
The ferret that you've identified in one of the photographs, was that a family pet?
Yes, it was.
Do you know whose responsibility it was to look after the ferret in terms of cleaning up after it?
It's hard to say because the ferret pretty much had run in the house.
Well, during that period of time, was it part of your housekeeping duties to keep track of the ferret?
I think Kitty and I pretty much would be the ones that ended up picking it up.
Were there any other pets in the home during any of the 4 times that you stayed there?
A Tristesse.
Okay, Tristesse,
Yes.
Tristess for the court reporter. Does that sound right?
Tristess.
Again, what was Tristesse?
Tristesse was a medium shorter dog that they had for 17 years.
And do you know when it was that Tristesse died, approximately?
Tristesse died during my 82-83 visit, somewhere
right.
in the middle.
So she was there during all your visits, right?
Yes.
Now, I believe you indicated that there was an incident you recall from 1976 where Lyle Menendez came to you and wanted to sleep with you. Is that correct?
Sleep in the same bedroom.
Right. And you've indicated that it was because that he made some comment to you about that. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I think your testimony is that the first time you told anyone about it, except for Kitty Menendez, was in January of 1992.
Correct.
Did you ever go to the county jail and speak with either of the defendants before talking to the defense attorneys about that statement in 1992?
Can you rephrase that question, please?
Okay. I believe it was January of 92 is the first time you told anyone else about that statement
Correct.
after it occurred.
Yes.
Prior to talking to the defense attorneys about that statement, before you talked to them, had you been to the county jail to visit either of the two defendants?
Yes.
Did you talk to them about it at that time?
No, I have not.
What prompted you to mention it during your talk with the defense attorneys in 1992?
Because I saw that it possibly was relevant.
Were you asked specifically a question about that?
No.
Okay. You volunteered it?
Yes.
And when you spoke to them, do you remember telling them that all you knew was that he, meaning Lyle, made some comment about Jose and touching?
What I stated was what I stated yesterday, and I have not seen what has been written
All
regarding
right.
that.
May I approach, please, Your Honor?
Yes.
Referring to page 4 of the interview of January the 15th of 1992. Okay, I'm going to ask you to read everything that's in yellow, okay? It goes over to the next page. Let me pull this out.
This appears to be a paraphrasing and a summation of what I said, but not my exact words.
All right. The report doesn't indicate anything about you gesturing towards your genitals. Is that correct?
This does not, no,
All right. And in the
although I did.
all right, all right. So you did, but the report doesn't reflect that. That's correct, right?
Correct.
And as far as on the second page, page 5 of this, it says Diane said that she really was never sure what that was all about. And whenever she had suspicious thoughts about it, she just convinced herself that she had misunderstood or that maybe she wasn't remembering it correctly. Okay, is that what you told the defense attorneys?
Let me read this again.
Okay.
I believe that I was never sure what that was all about in reference to Kitty's reaction, and that,
Well, let me ask you.
and that when I had misunderstood that, that's a paraphrasing of me saying that I was incorrect, that I was wrong.
Okay, that you misunderstood Kitty's reaction, or you misunderstood what Lyle had indicated to you?
Basically, that I had misjudged the whole situation, and that I didn't want to think about it.
Now, after you heard about, or after this was told to you in 1976, you went back to the Menendez household 3 more times, correct?
Yes.
Even though you were suspicious about what had happened in 1976.
Objection on humanity.
Rephrase the question.
Did you, when you went back to the house on the 3 subsequent occasions, did you just put that out of your mind, what had happened?
Yes, exactly.
Now, may I have a moment, please?
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
All right, outside the presence of the juries, the defendants are in court and all counsel. Is there something that counsel want to discuss?
Yes, Your Honor, we're going to reject the use of these visiting slips on 2 grounds. The first is on discovery grounds. I think there's not a great deal of clarity in the Izazaga opinion concerning discovery. And I think I should indicate to the record that the court may have observed we were shown the visiting slips as Mrs. Janet was about to use them, if the witness had not before. And if I understand the theory underlying Izazaga, the way that the Supreme Court overcame the not fully reciprocal argument, which was the constitutional argument against the defense having to provide discovery, the Supreme Court saved the statute, in effect, by a rule that requires the prosecution to turn over to the defense all of the
evidence that our discovery generates in their hands for use for rebuttal and impeachment. And that was the way that the statute was held to be, to overcome the constitutional infirmity. So under that thinking, it seems to me that the prosecution should have to reveal to us what evidence they intend to use to impeach or rebut defense witnesses whose discovery is compelled under 115. And that was not done in this case. Now, had it been done, we would be in a position to argue concerning the second objection, which I'm not in a position to adequately argue because I don't have the materials here. And that is that there was a 987-9 order sealing visiting slips. It was an application and an order, and this ultimately, the court may remember, was relitigated this past year in front of Judge Basque in Department 100. And I mean, I could quote from memory, but what's the point? What Judge Basque said, I don't have those transcripts. I don't have that order available because I didn't know they were going to try to use visiting slips. And that's one of the problems when you have a case file that's 159 volumes and you don't know what evidence people are going to be trying to use in responding to that evidence in a fully documented way.
Well, what is the people's response?
Number one is a broad coverage rebuttal evidence. We had a discussion at the bench last week about the fact that I was complaining that I hadn't been shown documents in advance that were going to be used to impeach witnesses. And the court overruled my objection, and I asked if we would be able to do the same thing, and the court said yes, number one. Number two, the discovery order in this case does not cover these types of things. Number three, they have been shown visitor slips. Do they need time to prepare? They can have time to prepare. Number four, I have the transcript here of the proceedings in front of Judge Basque, which occurred on March 30th of 1993, at which time Ms. Abramson says that the order gained from Judge Rothman does not go to the ordinary visiting slip. It's right here in black and white on page 587 of volume 8, wherein she makes the assertion that the ordinary visiting slips, like the grandmother and other people, has nothing to do with the order of Judge Rothman. So that order doesn't cover these slips. And if the court would like to, the court can look at my volumes.
In regards to the specific issue here, it was discussed by counsel in the court relating to impeachment evidence. And the people's recollection of that conversation is accurate as far as what was said. I don't recall if it was at the sidebar or in open court. And there was no objection by the defense to that ruling by the court. Let me finish. The issue in relationship to these particular records, jail visiting slips, was the subject of litigation that counsel initially brought to this court. It was presented to this court as an issue that had arisen based upon declarations and testimony or offers of proof by the defense that was made to Judge Rothman relating to confidential matters that normally are not brought to the trial court's attention. And therefore, when there was a need for litigation of that issue, the matter was transferred either to be heard by Judge Rothman, and when he declined, then it was heard by the judge who at that point was sitting in Department 100. And as I recall from glancing at the transcript of those proceedings, it was basically a brokered arrangement. There was no real litigation that went to the issues that had been of concern to the defense in relationship to confidential or ex parte communications with the court. That the matter was discussed in open court with Judge Basque, and negotiated by the parties, and there was a resolution at that point, subject to any disputes that might arise later. And that is documented in a transcript. I have not looked at that transcript for several months. I just looked at it shortly after that proceeding to determine what the ruling had been. The issue at this point is this witness's testimony and regarding whether or not she visited the defendants in the jail. She's already testified that she did visit them in the jail, and this document is being used to, I suppose, establish how many times she visited them in the jail at any point. If she testifies at variance to the documentation that the people have, we don't know if she will or not. And whether it's introduced now or if introduced later, if the defense needs time to prepare, if there's a legitimate issue here of violation of some court order, then this evidence can be introduced at some later point to impeach the witness's testimony, bearing in mind that the defense would be objecting at this point, which would justify the people introducing it later if necessary.
Let me just add one more point that the court's analysis just now brings to mind, which is the use of these documents as collateral. And it isn't impeaching. She has indicated she visited them at the jail before she gave the statement, and there is nothing impeaching about these documents. And they're just a use of collateral evidence, unduly consumptive of time, and cumulative, when the witness is not denied the visit.
Well, we don't know if she will or not.
May I say
yes.
something? Make
Certainly.
sure I cut all of this.
Yeah.
I asked her about it during the break. She said she was out here in the summer of 1991. She visited 3 times. She saw each of the defendants. And although some of the slips are undated and some of them say 1996, the dates on them are June 9th, June 11th, and June 12th, which I believe probably was all 1991. And I think that's Mrs. Bazanich's position.
So there are 6 slips there and 3 for each defendant, is that it?
That's right. And my understanding is that's exactly if asked. She's already said.
All right, so then,
Times, I'm not sure, but I think we don't need to deal with the slips, is what I'm suggesting.
all right, I don't know if the prosecution would intend to introduce them if that was the nature of the testimony of the witness or not. If they do, then I'll hear their position as to why. Certainly, we've had a lot of evidence introduced by the defense, all sorts of photographs of events that are not in dispute that could be the subject of the same sort of objection that's just been articulated by the defense. That since we've had live testimony from a witness, there's no need to have a photograph of a museum trip or something of that nature, but the people haven't objected to it. So what is the people's response?
Well, we had testimony from the coroner and yet photographs were.
That's all true. That's all true, but I'm just responding to your recently articulated objection to this being cumulative.
Responding to your discussion.
It's my-
Yes.
Okay, it's the people's position that needs to document her visit, and it's demonstrative evidence of the fact of the visits. And one of them is stamped the correct date, and it's to document that that's when she went. It's a visual aid to make the jury understand that she went at that time.
Except, Your Honor, I think it might be unduly misleading since a number of them were stamped 1996.
I think the jury understands it's not yet 1996.
Yeah, it's hard to visualize what the objection is, that how prejudicial this would be if she admits it and they just show her paper that documents that she did.
I just think
What's
it's
the big deal?
confusing because the dates don't match, and I'd be willing to bet we get a question on it.
All right, as far as the discovery aspect to it, if the defense feels there is a legitimate issue in regards to violation of a court order regarding the access of the prosecution to these specific documents, then I'll permit the prosecution to introduce these documents at some later time if it's relevant and probative rather than now. And then it would perhaps be something that will be brought out at some other time in the trial that might be less convenient for the parties. But if it's admissible later on, then I certainly permit it. If it's admissible now, then I don't see any reason to delay it until some later time. And as far as Izazaga and council's analysis of it, if that's your position, it's not been articulated before, and if you want to argue the matter, we can do that at a more appropriate time rather than consume this time at this point on such a minor issue relating to these particular documents.
And I can indicate that once the discovery issue is resolved, if there will be admissible, we would stipulate whatever foundational basis they needed.
All right. Well, unless I hear someone from the defense saying that they want to pursue this objection on the grounds of violation of a court order, I'm going to let the prosecution use it now.
I'm sorry.
I'll have the court reporter read back what I just said.
Unless I hear something from the defense saying they want to pursue this objection on the grounds of violation of court order, I'm going to let the prosecution introduce it now.
Well, as I indicated, Your Honor, I don't have the court order. I don't have the transcript. I don't know what we're going to be doing this. What can I say? You say you've read the transcript and you.
No, I told you what I did. I read the transcript in at or near the time it was prepared. And I have no independent recollection of it other than that. And my recollection is no different or better than yours on that subject.
There's a paper clip, I think, like reading clip.
As far as this videotape is concerned, is that something that you wanted to play or not?
Yes, it is something we'd like to play. We understand the VCR's in the back hallway, and we should
Is
probably.
there still an objection to it being played?
Your Honor, on the original box, it appears the videotape was made in 1980. Excuse me, the original tape was made in 1980, which is the year that hasn't been.
That's a film.
Sorry, the film box, which is not going to be marked. They made a video from this. But this is Mrs. Menendez's handwriting according to the defense, and it says 1980.
That's not the point. The point is the behavior that she saw on other occasions that this film contains.
All right, so the objection is that this is not something that can be authenticated by the witnesses being present when the film was made. Is that correct?
And that is our own issue.
She's not in it. She doesn't. We can authenticate. She can testify to what the training sessions look like, that she saw training sessions, she saw them being filmed. Whether she saw this one being filmed or not, she doesn't know. Obviously, if it was 1980, she didn't. But it's the same drilling type of behavior.
Yeah.
Is this the only objection that people have, that it's not properly authenticated?
Yes, Your Honor.
Well, let's, if that's the only objection, then there's no need for my viewing it if they have no objections to its content. So if she can otherwise characterize this as illustrative of what she saw happen, then if the defense stipulates that this was something that occurred in 1980 and there's a photograph or a film of what occurred in 1980, then I see no objection or no other, since there's no other objection being made, I see no reason to foreclose it being used.
And we will join the stipulation.
We would stipulate. And I wanted to clarify what I meant before about stipulating to the foundation. I merely meant that we would not dispute that it was her handwriting on it, so she wouldn't have to be brought back. She's obviously about to have a baby, so I wouldn't want to.
Okay.
Or the dates of the visit that she would testify to.
Well, she's here, and she as I said, unless I hear something that there's a legitimate dispute about the documents properly being in possession of the prosecution, I don't see any reason not to use them now.
Why don't we start with the witness and let you read?
Well, so I understand it, the prosecution is almost through with the examination.
You have a moment. We won't object on that basis.
All right. why don't we set up the video equipment since it's going to be played during the further direct examination, and then we'll have the jury come out.
You know what I'd like to do, though, Your Honor? I haven't seen the video. I don't know what the quality is. I only saw the film that had been made last night. And I understand the VCR's in the hallway. What I'd like to do, but I don't know if I have the court's permission, is just go into the hallway under the VCR.
No, as I said, we're going to set it up, so we'll do that now.
Okay, wait.
Your Honor, I have a suggestion. Since Ms. Lansing wants to reopen, can she go ahead and just reopen, play this, do the other stuff she wants to do, and then I'll continue to cross?
All right, that's fine with me.
2.5 minutes.
All right, well, let's get see if we can get the sheriff to help us with the video equipment, or Detective Zoller or somebody, and then we
How's the
can
quality? Did you see?
proceed with counsel looking at the tape for a moment to see if it's adequate, and then we'll proceed.
Just, no, not.
Nobody's gonna cut that.
Is the VCR?
Yesterday, we got the
Problem. Now it's, that's it.
All right, how are we doing?
It looks okay, Judge. I think we can rewind it. I think it'll be all right.
All right, counsel have approved the video cassette. Now let's proceed and get the juries out so we can start up with the trial.
Yeah, with regard to location, I'm not sure that the jury in the audience is going to be able to see.
Well, they'll have to make sure as it is, and if it's received as an exhibit, then if they want to have it replayed, they can do it at that time.
Your Honor, Mr. Mariano and I can move over maybe once in a while.
You want to move over, but just leave it right where it is.
No, I'm not good at these things.
All right, let's get the juries in place. Okay, we have one jury in, and the next is about to arrive. Before they do, let me ask jury here, the blue jury, what I've asked before as to whether or not anyone has been exposed to anything about this case in any form whatsoever outside of the courtroom since the trial has begun, other than what you've already told me. If you have, would you raise your hand? Okay, nobody has. All right. Okay, and now the other jury is in the courtroom as well. And let me ask the gold jury the same question I've asked the blue jury, what I've been asking everyone throughout the trial, whether any of you have been exposed to anything about this case outside of the courtroom in any form whatsoever since the trial began, other than what you might have already told me. If you have, would you raise your hands? Anybody? Okay. All right. Nobody has. All right. Let's resume with the witness's testimony. If you get back on the witness stand, please. All right, and we'll break off the cross-examination for the moment to permit the defense to pick up on a couple matters that they forgot to deal with during earlier examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Vander Molen, were there two incidents which occurred during your 1982-83 visits which are difficult for you to talk about?
Yes,
You know which two I'm referring to.
yes, I do.
Do you remember which event occurred first?
I do not, no.
Can you tell me about them one at a time? Was there one that took place
Yeah,
in the basement?
yes, we were downstairs playing
Who was
around.
we?
Oh, Lyle and Eric and I. And it started out as just exaggerated play. We were all wrestling around, and somehow or another, in a very rapid transition, they began. We were wrestling, and before I knew it, they were tying me up, and they got me down to my bra, with me screaming and them being very frantically doing what they were doing.
And did they stop then?
Yes, they did. It stopped at that point.
And is this embarrassing to you?
Yes.
And was there another incident that happened in front of the television set?
Yes, with Lyle and I.
And was this in the morning, the afternoon, the evening? When was it?
It was at nighttime.
He was 14 years old at this time. Is that correct?
Yes,
14,
approximately.
What room were you in?
We were in the TV room, the family room that's off the kitchen.
Was anybody else there at the time?
Eric was upstairs in his bed asleep, as far as we knew.
And where were Kitty and Jose?
They were out for the evening.
And where in the TV room were you and Lyle?
We were both laying down watching a movie right in front of the TV.
And were you lying next to each other?
Yes, parallel to each other.
And what happened?
Without any words being spoken, Lyle climbed on top of me and began fondling my breasts.
And what did you do?
I froze because I had no
Were you surprised?
idea how to handle this, because I was surprised. I didn't invite it, provoke it, entice it. It just came.
And what did you do? Did you stop it?
Yes, I did. It stopped.
Did you yell at him or move?
And I believe I just moved, and he knew that
Did
to
that
stop.
And did it ever happen again?
No.
You testified earlier that you used to watch when the boys were taken to the swimming pool and Jose would teach them how to swim. Is that correct?
Yes.
And were you present at the time when the family would film these training sessions?
Yes.
And would it just be them swimming back and forth and diving and repeating the same behavior over and over?
They practiced diving and kick strokes and proper arm strokes.
Okay. And how long would these sessions last?
It could go on for an afternoon session. You know, it was serious coaching on behalf of Jose, coaching the boys since he was a professional swimmer or semi.
When you say go on for an afternoon, are you talking about the whole afternoon, like from 12 to 4? Or are you talking about 2 hours, or do you have an?
I don't recall exactly how long, but that it would be an afternoon worth of practicing this.
Okay. Thank you. Your Honor, I have a video I'd like to show at this point in time, and we need to mark it as the next in order.
All right.
Are you gonna? Yeah, please.
All right, then if it is ready, it can be played at this time. All right, if anybody has difficulty seeing it, if this is received as an exhibit later in the trial, then it would be in the jury room, and the jury would be able to see it as well at that point. All right, the tape has been played.
Your Honor, I believe it to be a stipulation that this is a film that was made during 1980 of Lyle and Eric in the swimming training sessions.
Is that stipulated by both defendants?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, any further examination of the witness?
No. Ms. Vander Molen, did you recognize
Yes.
the people in that film?
Yes.
Who did you see?
Jose and Lyle and Eric.
All right, did you have further cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor, I have there 6 pieces of paper. I'd like to mark them collectively as exhibit 172.
172.
vote, please.
Yes.
Mrs. Vander Molen, I will show you this pieces of paper and ask if you recognize these slips. There's exhibit 172 for the record. Recognize them?
Yes.
And are these visitor slips that you filled out to visit both of the defendants, each one 3 times in 1991?
Yes, Maria and I.
All right, on one occasion it's here.
Could we move the microphone?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, why don't you get yourself set up?
And I didn't hear the answer. That was for more than just your visit? Someone else was with him?
Yes, Maria,
Maria?
the boy's grandmother.
Was that on each of the 6 visits?
I was staying with her at the Calabasas house the week that I came out with my son. And we brought my son, she and I and my son came out because the boys had met my son. They didn't know he existed until '89. So it was important to me to bring him. She drove me, and to the best of my recollection, on one visit, I know she came in because she had my son stay with a woman that she had made acquaintance with while visiting them herself.
Okay, could I ask you another question, please?
Uh-huh.
All right, did you have private visits with either or both of the defendants, or were you always with someone else on these 6 separate occasions? Do you know?
Maria and I both went, and sometimes she came in, sometimes she stayed out.
All right. Do you remember what month it was in 1991 that you had these visits?
In June.
All right, and they are not dated, but one of them has a date of June the 11th of 1991 stamped on the back. Does that refresh your memory as to about what date it was?
Sure.
What were the 3 days, if you recall?
That week, I guess it appears June 9th, June 11th, and June 12th.
Now, I believe you just testified when Ms. Lansing just started asking you questions again, that two incidents occurred during your 1982-1983 visit. Is that correct?
Yes.
When was it that you told anyone on the defense about those visits? Do you remember?
I think that they asked me if I recalled them, to the best of my.
When you told the defense attorney, who was it you told? Let me ask you that.
Jill Lansing, to the best of my knowledge.
And was that before the January 15th, 1992 discussion?
I don't recall.
Well, you told Ms. Lansing about these two
We
incidents.
discussed it on the January 1992 visit. Yes, that's when we discussed it.
You discussed it then?
Yes.
And if I were to show you the report and there's nothing in the report about that, would that refresh your memory as to when you told her?
I'm gonna get this date. I'm not sure which incident she's talking about.
All right, why don't
Okay.
you clarify exactly what it is you're referring
Okay.
to?
I'm referring to the two incidences that you just testified about, the one where you were tied up and the one where Lyle Menendez crawled on top of you. Okay, those two incidences, when was it that you first told the defense about them?
I do not remember.
How many interviews did you have with the defense attorneys in this case?
I interviewed with them in January, and I've interviewed with them since I've been here.
And so January of 92 was the first time? Excuse me, Honor, I believe Ms. Lansing's shaking her head.
All right, your question, please.
Do you remember when the first time was that you talked to the defense attorneys?
I spoke with them prior to their coming out in January of 1992.
And when you spoke to them prior to them coming out in January of 92, was that over the phone or in person?
Both.
So
I think there was one time when I was here in June
and
that
that,
I met with Jill.
And was that the June that's represented by the slips that I just showed you?
Yes,
So that would have been June of 91, correct?
yes,
And during the June of 91 visit, it was then that you told them about the incidents about being tied up and having Lyle crawl on you. Is that correct?
possibly.
Why,
I don't recall exactly when we discussed it.
why didn't you tell them about the incident in 1976 with Lyle wanting to sleep with you when you first met with him in June of 91?
Objection overruled. Objection overruled.
Yeah.
Your Honor, what are the grounds, please?
I'm sorry?
What were the grounds?
That you mischaracterized.
Okay,
sleep.
all right. When Lyle wanted to come down and spend the night with you, and that happened in 1976, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
you'd sleep in the same bedroom.
Right, and you told us why. Now, you also indicated the first time you told anyone about that was in January of 92, correct?
Correct.
And that would have been at least your second interview with the defense attorneys, correct?
Yes,
Because you also met with them 6 months earlier, or 7 months earlier, in June of 91.
correct.
And is it your recollection now that it was June of 91 that you told them about the sexual incident with you being tied up and Lyle crawling on top of you?
We discussed it, possibly. I did not tell them. They asked me if I remembered something about it. We didn't go into any detail.
All right. During that conversation, did you tell them about what had happened in 1976 with Lyle wanting to sleep with you?
No, I did not.
Why not?
It was something that I had held within me for a long time, had not thought about. I did not know the defense. I did not know anything about the case at that point. We were talking in generalities about who my family members were when I had been out there.
Did you find out something about the defense that caused you to bring forth this information in January of 92?
I believe I told Jill on the phone when I knew that they were
When you
coming.
say Jill, who are you referring to?
Jill Lansing, I'm sorry. That there was something that I wanted to discuss with them when they came out.
And that was prior to the January 92 interview, is that correct?
Yes.
And at that time, had you learned something about what the defense would be that prompted you to recall or to tell this?
In the course of our interview, yes, there was something.
And is that what?
And I don't recall what it was that was said to me at this point.
But something was said to you by Ms. Lansing, is that correct?
Yes,
And that prompted you to tell her the information?
yes,
And that was the first time then since you talked to Mrs. Menendez about it, correct?
yes,
Now, the incidences that occurred in 1983, where you were tied up, I want to ask you about that one first. At the time, you were approximately 23 years old, is that correct?
yes,
And at that time, the defendants were approximately 12 and 15?
they were either 11 and 14 or 12 and 15.
And they were able to tie you up, is that correct?
Yes.
Were they strong?
The entire incident started out in a playful manner, so that by the time they were tying me up, it was in a very rapid, it transitioned from being playful to embarrassing for me. And by the time it had made the transition to being embarrassing, the two of them were already in the process of having me tied up and so forth.
Were they doing it together,
Yes,
both of them?
yes.
And what were you doing right before it turned from being playful into serious?
Overruled.
What were you doing with them?
We,
All right, be a little more specific, please.
What activity were you engaging in with them that turned from playful into something more serious?
I don't know that I was doing anything specific at the moment that it turned from playful to serious or embarrassing. It was never, it was embarrassing on my part. It was never serious on their part. It was more of a frenzy type moment that they transitioned into, and I stopped it at that point.
Well, what were you doing right before this incident started? Were you watching
I was-
TV? Were you wrestling? Were you playing Monopoly? What were you doing?
We began by having playful wrestling.
The three of you.
Yeah,
And they were adolescents at that time, is that correct?
yes.
And then the other incident, did that occur before or after? The incident where Lyle crawled on top of you. Was that after you were tied up or before?
I do not recall.
Did you ever report either of these incidences to anyone?
No, I do not.
Was the first time that you talked about them with anyone when you mentioned them to the defense attorneys in June of 91?
Yes,
And at the time that Lyle Menendez crawled on top of you, he was an adolescent, is that correct?
yes.
And you were approximately
23,
at the time.
yes.
And you had been living in the house for quite a period of time when this occurred, is that correct?
Yes.
What did Mrs. Menendez look like when she was proud of her children? What kind of smile did she exhibit?
Oh, when she was proud of her children?
Yes.
It was similar to when she got angry on it would be a smile instead of a grimace.
All right, so
when she would go like this and she'd go like this.
All right, so she would smile the same way that she would express displeasure, is that correct? In a similar type of way?
Her body movements would sit back rather than come towards you, and it would be the same clenched teeth, only it would be in a smile instead of like that. But her arms would come out to the side, and she would put her arms in fists or her hands in fists.
I believe you indicated on your direct examination that you recall an incident where Eric ran away from home. That's how you characterized it? Did he run away from home?
I know that he was missing. He was gone when he shouldn't have been.
Do you remember having described it earlier as the boat was missing and Eric searching for the boat?
No.
Okay, do you remember, was there another incident where the boat was missing and Eric went to look for it?
I don't recall.
May I approach, please?
Yes.
Ms. Vander Molen, have you seen any notes of the interviews that you had with the defense attorneys before testifying today?
Not for a long time.
I'm going to show you this right here, just that one sentence, and ask you if that refreshes your memory. Yes, of course.
Okay.
Just a second, I have to tell the attorney something. It's the supplemental notes, January the 15th. The 5th page, the 2nd paragraph from the bottom. All right, so if the characterization is that you remember the boat being missing and Eric searching for it, would that be an incorrect characterization of what your recollection is?
Yes.
Okay, so it's your recollection here today that rather than the boat being missing, it was Eric running away?
It was Eric missing, the canoe was missing, and Eric was found with the canoe.
Okay. Were there any times during the 4 times that you visited that you ever saw laughing and gaiety and lightheartedness?
Yes.
All right, could you describe which visit that was during and what that compromised or comprised, pardon me?
There were moments throughout each of the visits, more so in the earlier visits than in the later visit. Generally surrounding an accomplishment that would be enjoyed for the moment.
Did you ever see the family get in bed together and talk, and the parents would be there and the kids would get in and you'd come and join? Did that ever happen?
The boys would join Kitty in the bed if Jose was not at home, and we would talk for a while until it was bedtime, and then I would get ready to go downstairs, and that would be when they would discuss whose turn it was to sleep with Kitty if Jose was not home. When Jose was home, I recall Jose gathering in the den with the boys until it was about bedtime. To the best of my knowledge, I can't picture all four of them.
All right, if I showed you a report, do you think it might refresh your recollection?
Let's show it to council first.
Does this refresh your recollection that when Jose was home, the boys and their parents would be on the bed laughing and you saw gaiety and lightheartedness? Does that refresh your memory?
I'm not sure that those are my exact words, but
Is the sentiment correct?
the den is adjoining the bedroom, so perhaps that's a blend of the two things that I was saying.
I believe you indicated on direct examination that Eric Menendez and his cousin Andy were friendly. Is that correct?
Mhm.
Is that yes?
Yes, I'm sorry.
And on several occasions, did Andy spend the night at the Menendez home?
Yes,
And did he appear to be an invited guest in the Menendez home?
yes,
And did Eric appear to have a close relationship with his cousin?
yes.
Now, did you see this occur? During which visit was it that you saw Eric close with his cousin Andy?
By the last visit, Marta and her children were living in the area, so I know it occurred then. There was an earlier visit where he was by himself staying in the home, and I'm not sure exactly when that was and for how long.
When you say by himself, what do you mean?
He was a temporary guest in the home.
All right, so prior to the summer of 82 and 83, Andy Cano came and stayed as a guest just as you had, is that correct?
Yes, not for as long of a duration, though.
Do you remember about how long?
I can't tell you.
And then during 82 and 83, Andy Cano's family lived close by and he was there frequently, would that be correct?
He made several visits to the house. I can't tell you how frequently they were.
May I have a moment, please?
Yes.
Okay. In the situation that you described that occurred
Where you were tied up by the brothers, what did they tie you up with?
I don't recall.
And did they tie you to something or did they just tie your hands together? How did that occur?
My hands were tied together.
Was that in
This-
front of?
I don't remember specifics because of the embarrassment involved with it. It's hard for me to recall specifically what took place, and I can't tell you specifics about it.
Okay, were you alone in the house with them at the time?
I would imagine so.
Okay, and after you, at some point you got,
We were in the basement by ourselves, so I can answer you that.
and they got do you had a top on? Did they get your top off?
I don't know that they took it all the way off, but it was unbuttoned, revealing my bra.
And that was the end. Did they take off your bra?
No,
And how did you get them to stop?
by insistence.
Thank you, I have nothing further.
Any redirect?
Ms. Vander Molen, you were asked about visiting at the jail.
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yes.
How many times have you been out here in California since Eric and Lyle were arrested?
Then and now.
And how long were you out for then?
approximately 1 week.
And this was June of 91?
Yes.
And you said you had your son with you?
Yes, I did.
And how old is your son?
He is now 9 years old.
And you were staying at a home in Calabasas with the boy's grandmother, Maria? Is
Yes,
that
I
correct?
was.
Now, when you went to visit at the jail, how did you get there?
Maria drove me.
And your son went with you
Yes, he did.
on each visit? Or on some?
On some of the visits, I don't recall if he was there every time. I guess he would have been there because the times that he didn't see, wasn't able to, then he stayed with that woman. So
Okay. Now, when you visit at the jail, do you speak to someone face to face, or is there something dividing you?
we speak through a glass on the telephone.
And do you have any information about whether this is in the jail, I take it? Is that right?
Yes.
The visits take place in the jail?
Yes,
Okay. And there are sheriffs all around?
yes,
And there are other people visiting?
yes.
Now, if you were visiting either Lyle or Eric, would they be seated directly in front of you?
They'd be across from me in a chair
Okay, and
with
there'd
a
be
phone
a glass partition?
and a glass partition between the two of us.
And would there be other people who were in jail seated on both sides of them?
Yes.
And how close do they sit? Are they 10 feet apart or?
No, I mean between the people who are in jail,
Yes.
there's just about this much space, and then the next person would be right here.
Okay, so indicating you're on approximately 4 feet,
It's like more like 3 feet.
3 feet? Okay. So they're about 3 feet and there are people who are in jail on both sides of them?
Yes.
And just 2 or 3 in an area, or would there be a larger number?
It depends on how many people had been called out for a visit.
Okay, but usually would there be?
But there was always some other people that they'd be called out with.
Okay. And the side that you're seated on, is it set up similarly? So there would be visitors?
For
close
each,
to you?
yes, for each person who was being visited, there was another person across through the glass that was talking to them.
And sometimes would there be more than one person visiting somebody?
Yes.
How many people can come in at a time?
I don't know. I know that you can go in 2 or 3 at least, or 4 since we've now had 4.
Okay. And when you talk on the phone this way, how long are the visits?
Generally, half or 20 minutes to half an hour.
Now, after you visited with them, meaning Lyle and Eric, you gave the information to me that we're discussing here today in January of 91. Is that correct?
Objection,
92, I'm sorry.
objection, let's take some testimony.
Sustain.
Okay. Did
I had
you
a question.
did you see me again after you were here in California in June?
Yes, I did.
And when was that?
January of 1992.
And do you remember whether you gave me this information in person or on the phone? Do you
I-
recall?
Objection, today was the one information.
Sustain.
The information about what happened in the basement with Lyle and his father.
I told you in person.
So the next time you would have seen me would have been 7 months after you were visiting the boys in the jail. Is that correct?
Yes.
You were asked if you had a good time in 1976 when you were visiting. Were you made to feel special then?
Yes, I was.
Did you get a lot of attention from Kitty?
A lot, yeah.
And did she have some particular interest in your appearance and your behavior?
She helped me to lose weight, which was important to me at the time. And she drove me to get my first driver's license. She introduced me to my first boyfriend. We made trips to places that are nationally known and so forth.
So that was a good time.
Yes.
Did you ever get that kind of attention or caring from her again?
No, in all honesty, no.
And you were asked if you were a guest in the home. Did you always have chores to do?
Yes, there were always chores. In the last visit, it was overwhelming.
Okay, now, when it would be chores, would it be just a matter of, gee, would you mind doing the breakfast dishes, or would the projects be larger than that?
No, I was responsible for cleaning the entire house and chauffeuring the boys, I'd say pretty much daily in the evenings and sometimes to school, and taking care of whatever yard work there was needing to be done. And
You were asked if it was your responsibility to clean up the ferret. Do you remember that?
yes, I remember the question.
And did you try to clean up after the ferret?
While cleaning, yes, if I saw it, there wasn't any specific place to clean it up, so it's hard for me to recall.
Well, was
Yes.
it in every room? The ferret droppings, were they in every room of the house, or did the ferret just have access to one or two rooms? Or
In the ferret room, the house.
did he get in cabinets and under
Yes.
beds and all sorts of...
Yeah, I mean, he'd show up all over the place.
How big was he?
Okay, let's move on to something else.
Okay.
You said, you were asked about the reference in the report, my wording, that you felt you had misjudged the situation with regard to the incident in the basement.
The action assumes facts not evidence that it's rewarded.
Rephrase the question.
I'm sorry, I
Rephrase the question.
I didn't hear what the objection was.
As to the wording, as you've misstated the evidence.
You've told us about an incident that occurred between Lyle and his father in the basement, in which Lyle told you that they had been touching each other. Is that
Mhm.
correct?
Yes.
And there was, you said that you thought you had misjudged the situation. Do you remember that?
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
Since it was never discussed again, and due to Kitty's reaction, I took the responsibility for the way the whole thing was handled.
Well, when you told her what you thought had happened, did she seem to think that your assessment of the situation was correct, or that it was ridiculous? Did she respond in a way that showed you that she took what you had to say seriously?
No, she did not.
How did she respond?
Overall,
How did she respond?
There's a way when she does not believe you, she shakes her head, and it's just like an utter that the whole thing is absurd, and then she walked out, and that's when she went and got Lyle.
And how old were you at this time?
17.
And was Kitty someone whose opinion affected you?
Yes.
I have nothing else. Thank you.
all right, anything else? On redirect?
Well, it would have to be under that.
All right, this matter has already been gone into in great depth.
This is not on this.
Well, I'll see you at sidebar as to why this hasn't been brought up before.